5 soldiers and 23 civilians were killed. Army Council member Billy McKee was the IRA's Belfast commander.
That was my theory, that to bring the war to the mainland would have brought the Brits closer to talks and settlement. When they start doing property and things happen in England, the people in England begin want to know all about it.
Gradually, Brendan's secret work with Oatley began to make progress. Christmas 1974 saw a breakthrough. The IRA declared a 10-day ceasefire, a window designed for a British response. But there was silence. Brendan was worried that the ceasefire wasn't going to last.
I got a message which suggested that this situation was breaking down and that the IRA was planning to go back to war, as it were, on the 2nd of January. So I got agreement to say something encouraging about the sorts of talks which could take place.
I would have said to Michael Oakley, what is on the agenda? What is it about? And Michael would always say, an end to violence, and we can then discuss the various areas. The question you get into, was he prepared to talk about British withdrawal? And the answer to that is, on his terms, yes.
When asked what I was prepared to discuss, I said, I'm prepared to discuss anything you like.
Including structures of withdrawal from Ireland.
Whatever that may mean.
Brendan noted down what Oatley had said. The British were prepared to meet and talk to the IRA. The word withdrawal was on the agenda. What it meant was open to question. On Christmas morning, with the note in his pocket, Brendan began the long drive across the border to the home of the IRA's former Chief of Staff, Rory O'Brody.
It was a very, very wet day. I remember well the car sliding from one end to another, and it had to be done. So I set off and drove down there and knocked at his window.
He arrived in his motor car, and I looked out the window just by accident to see my friend appearing on Christmas Day, and I said, oh, this must be serious.
Rory was very generous, brought me in, gave me Christmas dinner, and asked me what I wanted. And I told him what I wanted. I said, the British have agreed to meet you. And he said that he would have to put that message through to other people, namely senior members of the IRA.
He said he had a message from the British government. I wasn't surprised at that, because why else would he be coming that distance at Christmas? And that message included the words, an invitation to engage in discussions of structures of British disengagement from Ireland.
O'Brody decided Brendan would have to make his case in person before the IRA leadership. On New Year's Eve, he drove him to the secret location where the Army Council was in session. For Brendan, this was a critical and dangerous moment. Once inside, there was no guarantee he would ever get out.
I don't think they gave him an easy time. I think they questioned him very closely, as would be expected. This was a very serious matter.
The way he was looking, like the eyes all around, and he looked at me and said, that fella doesn't know what's going to happen here. He's on tenterhooks.
Brendan managed to convince the Army Council that the British were serious and wanted to negotiate. He said he was prepared to hold the meetings at his home in Derry on condition that security was his responsibility. But Brendan couldn't do everything on his own. He needed help from someone he could trust. Bernie Mount agreed to pick up the IRA leaders at secret locations across the border and drive them to Derry. Rory O'Brody was one of her passengers.
I'd just pick him up and bring him back at night time whenever it was dark. And whenever I did pick him up, and on the way back, everything seemed to be fine, heading back to Derry. But I was always afraid in case if something happened in the Republic, because I think it would have been pretty difficult if I had been picked up with him at that time.
We had to negotiate roadblocks. She was quite relaxed, skillful and reliable. And I just attempted to tone in with the situation. Young lady driver, myself.
He said to me, he says, look, you take my papers. And I says, what do you mean, take your papers? What am I going to do with them? He says, put them up your jumper, do anything. And I took them and I put them up front of my jumper.
She would be very polite and nice to them. And I think they appreciated that too. She was a good-looking girl.
Bernie would then drop off the IRA leaders at Brendan's house where the talks would take place.
This is a simple room in a simple family house. This is where it all happened. And there was, hard as to believe, there was always a rush for this chair here. And the notion that big things happened in the Oval Office in Washington or in the Grand Hall of the Kremlin or the People's, whatever it is in China, actually it doesn't happen that way. It happens less formally and simply. And when you get a situation where eventually somebody's dying for a cup of tea and says, I'll make a cup of tea, and you have to ask somebody who you're not very happy about, would you like tea? Do you want sugar in it? Do you want, breaks it down. And then, of course, what happens after that is somebody says, oh, when you're there, would you get a bucket of coal?
They were coming here for peace talks. So that is all I knew. I never asked anything about the meetings, what happened during them, what they talked about. I didn't want to know. For my own sake, I didn't want to know.
We didn't know, no, we didn't know, weren't told, but at all. You know, at the same time, you seen the boys on the TV, so you knew that they were who they are, and then I suppose from the first time when the people were all here, and then there was a ceasefire, one of the very early ones, so you sort of figured out, all right, that's what was going on.
The first thing to do was to replace bombings and killings with dialogue. It seems simple, but that was the essence of everything, dialogue. And every day of peace was a life saved.
Brendan's meeting with the Army Council ensured that the ceasefire held. It remained in place for most of 1975. For months on end, British government officials continued their talks with the IRA leadership in Brendan's back parlour. Years later, I was given rare access to the IRA's working notes of those meetings. They revealed that the British said some astonishing things. The working notes say the tendency is towards eventual British disengagement. Is that working note accurate?
Yes, it is accurate, and those are not my words or anyone else's words on the Republican side. Those were the words given by the British officials on behalf of their government.